After trying to do this about 4 times, I've decided that I may have to do this in 2 parts. So the first part is to show you a variety of Catholic, Protestant, Anglican prayer beads, prayer ropes, rosaries. The second is just sharing with you my exploration of these spiritual tools and how emotional conditioning and emotionally charged memories around these spiritual tools provided for me a great enough motivation to return to them, to stick to them, even though I found myself in a completely different spiritual context. So let's start with the prayer beads themselves. So here I have several. These are Catholic rosaries, which are the most well known, with the cross at the end. You have the corpus there, and then you have one for Our Father, and then 3, and then 1 for Our Father. The 3 here is Hail Mary, the wife of God, the mother of the Son, and the wife of the Spirit, the mother of the Son, and the daughter of the Father, or something like that. I can't say them in English. I can say them in Indonesian. And that I will talk a bit more about that muscle memory and emotional conditioning with regards to using these spiritual tools and harnessing that magic, so to speak, in part 2. And so that is the 3 lilies, again dedicated to Mary, usually the shield in the middle. And then you have 10 Hail Marys, and then 1 Our Father, and then 10 Hail Mary, and then 1 Our Father. So there are several decades. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decades. You have a string up to 16 decades, I think, which usually is seen worn around the waist of nuns and monks, Catholic nuns and monks. So that's the first shape. This is a child's rosary, I believe, just judging from the size of it. I tend to prefer to, this is not my rosary collection. I have a rosary collection video coming up as well, which I have been promising you guys for a couple of years at least now, so I do apologize for the delay, because that box of my rosary collection is in storage. Seemingly most of my life is in storage, but anyway. And then what I've discovered recently, and so this is another one, of course, this is from Medjugorje in Bosnia. This is given by a friend of mine who's a Hindu, who went there on a pilgrimage, and he's a Hindu who goes to novena as well. So novena is a rosary, 9 days straight, I think, of rosaries dedicated to, I actually don't know, but all I know is that when you have a wish or you have a petition for something that you're hoping to come true or to come to, reality, you go for a novena. That's all I know. So it's not quite my aesthetic, but I quite like the fact that the cross has the Father and the sort of Holy Ghost there with the dove, and at the back there it says Medjugorje. So, and that's from wood. So that's 3 of that range. The other one that I found recently is what I think might be either an Anglican or a Protestant rosary. And so this is a recreation or a reproduction, a miniature, I would say, of one they found in the ship called Mary Rose, which is one of Henry VIII, one of his warships. And I've been quite obsessed with Tudor England, especially Henry VIII's reign, because of his 6 wives. I've been quite fascinated by that for a long time, but also because he is effectively the beginning of the Church of England. Directly or indirectly, he is the creator of the Church of England, or the Anglican Church, a church which I have been thinking about converting since the late 90s, but never did. And so I think the original, I will try to insert a photo or show you a picture of it somehow, either a link to it down below or somehow. But if you look at the, according to my research anyway, it's actually quite large. So this is very, very small. I think the original was probably about that big, the size of a necklace, and these beads are quite huge. Each of these smaller beads are about this big, if not bigger. and the cross is not flat like that. Originally the cross is formed out of almost like 4 cones, this one, that one, and that one. So what's interesting here, as you see, is that 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's 4 decades, and the composition is quite different. It doesn't match the Catholic. So by then, apparently, by the time the ship sank, mechanical prayer with rosary had been banned under Henry VIII. So I think about 1537 or 1543 or something. So mid-1500s anyway, praying the rosary has been banned. And so it's interesting to find these kind of prayer beads on board of the ship. And that's when emotional conditioning attached to spirituality I found fascinating. So again, I'll discuss a bit more in part 2. And what I like about this one here is that this is where I show you this bead, which is a prayer bead from the Nichiren Buddhist prayer beads. I'm not quite sure if you can call it a mala. And I've always tried to understand how this works, because how do you count? You know, I keep, as far as I understand, mala beads are there to count. These prayer beads are there to count. And I was quite confused about this composition. And then I learned, if my research is correct, those of you who follow Nichiren Buddhism or the Soka Gakkai International or other Nichiren Buddhist organization, or please feel free to comment down below and let me know. But as far as I understand, for example, I think there's 2 here, and then there's 3 here, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of this represent certain principles in the human spirit, in terms of our weaknesses, in terms of our sinfulness, in terms of our etc., etc. And the point here is that what I found is that you don't count these. You don't count with this particular one. You simply hold on a second. I believe you do it like this. So over here like so, and over here like so, and like that in the middle, and you clasp your hand and you chant. I only know how to say Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I don't know the rest. And this remains in your hand as a reminder of all the stuff, of everything that is represented here. So you don't, it's a bit like when you say Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, I was told, I participated in Nichiren Buddhist chanting for about a couple of months, and you basically recite the Lotus Sutra, but not the content, but calling upon the Lotus Sutra, I think. And so that not theology, but that idea of using representation. So you don't actually use every bead to count. You simply use the beads to remind yourself of everything that this represents, and then you hold it in your hand as that reminder as you chant. And that inspired me to do the same with this one here. And so because this is so light, and with larger ones it can be quite cumbersome, and this is a small child's size, and when you do that it sort of dangle quite long at the bottom. So most you see people in church wrapping it around several times in the hand, and you still have that bit dangling, which sometimes you don't really want to chant or recite or pray, whatever you call it. You just want to hold it as a, this item that is charged with emotions and with your thoughts and your hopes and wishes and petitions, and you just need it emotionally rather than spiritually. And this one here is so light, it's so small, and at one point last year, no, not last year, this is after Christmas, I think, there are various things I was sort of thinking about. My aunt just died, and then a few people have died, and then I heard somebody's sick, and it doesn't look like she's going to get better, etc. She, of course, passed away in January, and I think I shared that with you. She was only 48, and it's anyway, and so I found myself just doing this, basically just having it around here and just clasping my hand. And because it's so light and because it's so short, it doesn't, it's, you see, it's so, and I basically just use that way. There is no Mary, there's no Jesus, there's no nothing. It's just wood, round, and a little bit of thing here. And it reminds me very much of how this functioned, if I understand that correctly. And I've sort of chanted with this a few times, and I still look at this and use this and clasp this in my hand sometimes, just to remind myself of all the things that these things are supposed to represent under the Nichiren Buddhist teaching. So that's one option, for those of you who are looking for a rosary, but you don't want it to be so Mary-oriented for a variety of reasons. Either you didn't grow up with that tradition, or maybe because of your own theology. The other is this one here, which was gifted to me by my other half. He asked what I would like for Christmas, and I asked him what he would like for Christmas. And we've decided that for Christmas, in order to make sure that we are focusing on the spirit of Christmas, of which gift giving is simply a reminder and a symbol of, we would keep presents for Christmas to be of something simple, something not too expensive. And so I decided that perhaps I would like a Paternoster Rosary, which is what this is. Now, the Paternoster Rosary, I came across the term, I think, when I was looking at this. And I was looking at this because I wanted an Anglican or a Protestant rosary without the corpus, without the Mary, without, something as blank a page as possible that still harken back to a tradition that I am sufficiently emotionally conditioned to. Again, I will talk about the emotional conditioning of the aspect of spirituality, emotional conditioning in spirituality in part 2. So if you are uncomfortable with Hail Mary for whatever reason, maybe because you grew up Protestant and you're not familiar with Hail Mary, but you wanted something a little bit more ceremonial, a little bit more physical in terms of your expression of your spirituality. Perhaps you're experimenting with a blend of spiritual paths, who knows. I recently spoke to Debbie from Cards and Cups, I think, who was in Japan for her master's. She's returned to the US of A now, and she's embarking on her PhD. And she grew up Protestant, but she's looking at prayer beads to be a little bit more ceremonial and a little bit more physical with her new spiritual path that potentially can be argued as a blending of a few paths. And I told her that this is a Paternoster. This is also. Having said that, you can always use the traditional Catholic Mary-oriented rosary to say Our Father with, if you like. There's no rosary police isn't going to come knocking at your door. So that's one. And another one is this one here, which is 150, but there's beads. Some are 50 beads, some are 10 beads. You probably call this a prayer rope, I'm not sure, but this is all Our Father. And then my research on the Our Father beads, it seems that a few hundred years ago, rosaries or prayer beads aren't like this necessarily. They are in the shape of ropes, and basically just a rope with beads and with tassel at each of the end of it. This is that roasted green tea that Joanne from Sacred Space Japan kindly gifted me. It's very refreshing. I told her it's like drinking the forest when the wind is running through it. So this one I got from Amazon. I'll put the link down below, and it's like $20 or something, or $30. I think it's made in Bethlehem, but I think the distributor or the seller is in the US. apparently the Holy Office or the Divine Office or whatever you call it used to recite the Psalm, 150 Psalms every day, and the hoi polloi, who a lot of the times in those days, I suppose, were illiterate. They can't read the Psalms from the Bible, so but they often grew up memorizing Our Father and Hail Mary, and so they do the they do the Our Father 150 times instead, with the help of these beads. So that's, I suppose, that's another way, if you're looking at something that isn't too Mary-oriented or isn't too Catholic. I'm very tempted to remove the corpus here, not because I hate Jesus or anything, it's just that it's a bit too much for me. But my other half, who gifted me this with love, said, can you please don't vandalize this? And I said, yeah, okay. So I'll just leave it. Also, I don't like glue, and that thing is glued on the cross, and I don't really like it. So those are various options for. I have some mala beads over there, and I'll probably do a separate video showing you my mala beads. But my experiment with mala beads have come to an end, and I will share with you why in part 2. I'll talk to you then.